We're all seeing the results of climate change. Whether it's man-made or natural, it really doesn't matter. What matters is Minnesota is known for its harsh winters and lots of tornadoes and hailstorms. The number one insurance claim is for roofing, and insurance claims have gone through the roof. So to help you understand what's going on and be able to be a little bit in control of your policy, I am here with Leander from
Alacrity Insurance Partners.
Right, and this is Mary Jo. Thank you so much for watching. Hang on, we've got some really important news for you. Thank you so much for letting us come and talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
Insurance is the topic of the day.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, yes, it's like we don't know what we don't know. And as a realtor, we just told the client, we had an insurance policy.
Yeah, exactly.
And what happened, I'll just give you brief what happened. I sold a 1900s fourplex, and the seller said they were paying $4,000 a year. Mm-hmm. So my God, great. We got quotes $9,700 to $13,000. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I called the agent, I talked him down, I gave him the list of upgrades. He was able to get it down to $6,700. But then after closing, they went back and said, oh, well, no, it's worth $1.2 million, so you're going to have to pay $1,000. Yep. That was brutal. I had no good advice. Mm-hmm. So we are here with Dash to get good advice about what you can do to control your insurance costs. Mm-hmm. So you have a little presentation about red flags. Would you go through what's the first red flag?
Sure. So my goal when working with my referral partners and the people that are in the same industry is I want to equip you with the knowledge to be able to help your clients while you have leverage. Mm-hmm. It's so important for your clients to know and your sellers to know what's going to affect their transaction when they want to buy or sell. Number one for me in this market is your roof age. It is indicating not only premium, but eligibility. So I have older roofs that make your house nearly uninsurable. And so for a buyer, that's extremely problematic. And for a seller, if you're trying to list a house that is potentially uninsurable and your buyer that's coming to you knows that, it can put a lot of wrinkles into your transaction there as well.
Roofing is a whole conversation on its own. Mm-hmm. What about metal roofs? I had no idea that asphalt roofs are highly flammable until the Maui fire. The only standing house was a 1925, traditionally built with a metal roof.
Right. So metal roofs from a risk standpoint are fabulous. Insurance companies love metal roofs. They're significantly more expensive, but they last 3, 4, 5 times as long, and they're way more resilient to hailstorms. The problem is that you have to get the consumers to buy them. And so consumers think they're ugly, because they are. But that technology is coming along where it actually kind of looks pretty good. And it's a similar concept with, we used to love wood roofs, especially in our beautiful western suburbs.
Oh, yeah.
And it costs $120,000 for your roof.
And they attract bugs.
And they rot.
Yes.
And so we have this logical conversation about what is best for insurance costs and loss ratios. And then we have the consumers who want to have a beautiful home. So metal roofs are fabulous. The market is evolving with metal roofs. And I couldn't recommend them enough because you will be rewarded with premium and eligibility with metal roofs. And in a market that's depreciating roofs rapidly now, instead of replacing them, metal roofs are very, very resilient to depreciation.
Metal roofs did get a bad rap because some of them were thin, and it sounded like you had Santa and his 8 reindeer upstairs.
Bingo.
Yep. Those were not insulated. So now they're doing a thicker roof. And there's I visited one roof, and they do like a light stone cladding that resists hail, and there's no noise underneath.
Yep.
So they will become the standard. The pricing will be coming down. Yep. So while we're on this topic, let's talk about door knocking roofers.
Great question. So first and foremost, everything exists in a spectrum. There are good adjusters and there are bad adjusters. There are good roofing companies, there are bad roofing companies. There are good agents and bad agents. Generally speaking,
good insurance agents.
Only good insurance agents, if I can help it. Roofers going door to door are part of the problem, because what we are experiencing now in the consumer market is we're experiencing the consequences of 20 years of Oprah roofing. You get a roof, you get a roof, you get a roof. Because the roofers go to your
That's
door
right.
and they say, Mary Jo, I know you don't know anything about insurance, but I think I can get you a free roof.
Exactly.
And sometimes they're right. But what they do is realize that roofers are salespeople and marketers first. They're not advising you about what the right call
Well,
is.
the guys that are knocking on your door
Bingo.
are not the ones on the roof.
True, and they're not the ones making a logical consultation with you about
That's
whether
right.
it's wise to file or not. So
Right.
they throw it against the wall and they see what sticks.
Right.
Sometimes you get a new roof, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they pit your insurance company against you, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But that is overall, the marketing of roofers door to door is predatory in a lot of ways, and it's putting homeowners in a position where they're not making the right decision whether or not to file a claim.
The other thing is, most of these roofers that are doing that have column A, column B. It happened to me. You know, somebody came, I can guarantee you. I went, oh my God, I have an 18-year-old roof. Don't worry, we'll fix it.
Right.
But I said, okay, how about a metal roof? Oh, we don't know anything about that.
Right.
So the guys that go door to door, they may be professional, but they're not the highest on the scale.
Right. And that it underscores the importance of having a good agent, whether it's a real estate agent or an insurance agent, who knows and is networked with trusted exterior companies.
Right.
I have 3 or 4 wonderful, wonderful companies who I trust to come to me and give me the right information. They'll say, you know what, Dash, that's wear and tear. It's not going to get covered. And we can try to file a claim if you'd like, but it's likely going to be denied for things that aren't covered, like discoloration, wear and tear, age.
Right.
And you need those people in your pocket to make good decisions for our clients.
Absolutely. There's just too much to know.
Yeah.
And I certainly was not a roofing expert, but quickly learned maybe I should figure this out for my clients.
Right.
So anything else about roofing or roofers? Do they get a deduction or do they get better premiums?
Yep.
With a metal roof?
Exactly. So just know the difference between a brand new roof in the insurance market and a 15-year roof, for example, could be thousands of dollars in your premium. So the best time to shop for home insurance is when you have a brand new roof. Inside of that 1 to 5 year window is when you're going to have the best premiums and the best coverage provisions.
Okay.
So no, right now our gap for our cutoff for replacement cost, as in your roof settlement is not depreciated, is about 10 years. If your roof is over 10 years old, many carriers will not offer your replacement cost anymore and they'll depreciate it. So metal roofing, you'll get a more favorable depreciation schedule because
it's a 50-year guarantee.
Exactly. So the depreciation schedule, for example, on a 20-year asphalt roof will be upwards of 60 to 75%, which means you're getting paid 25% of what you need to replace it. A metal roof would still be only depreciated between like 25 and 30% at 20 years, which is a huge difference. So
can I just ask about solar?
Yeah.
Solar on the roof.
Great question. So once you buy a solar panel, it becomes a part of your personal property and your dwelling because it's permanently installed. So in the insurance claim process, the insurance company pays to remove the solar panels and they pay to have them put back on.
Okay.
And they also pay for damage to the solar panels because they're yours.
Right.
So obviously learn your contracts, know your contracts for your actual solar company. Sometimes you're renting them. Sometimes they'll iterate who's responsible for the insurance.
Okay.
But the solar panels in your roof are covered. And you don't have to, you want to let your insurance agent know because it can affect the value of your roof, the value of your home, but they're covered for things that are covered by insurance claims like wind and hail and
lightning. Does that increase your premium?
If it increases the value of your house and your coverage goes up, your premium will go up minorly as well.
Okay.
But generally speaking, just having solar panels does not increase your premium.
Okay. Terrific.
On its own. Yep.
General exterior is something that you talked about.
Yep. So the good news here is that oftentimes in a real estate transaction, as you're counseling your clients to be ready to sell their home, homes look lovely. Oftentimes.
They do.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah. No. So I've been there.
Yeah. So no, if you have a beautifully manicured, perfect paint, perfect shingles, perfect everything outside, no debris in the yard, a lot of these homes that are just ready to sell aren't going to have any problems with this. But what I like my clients to know is that if you are an investment realtor, for example, and you're buying something to cash flow or you're buying something to flip, in order to buy insurance, you will get called out for things on the exterior like cracking steps, cracking foundation. Foundation issues can be a huge thing in real estate, as you know, too.
That would mean we're leaving right now?
Bingo. Well, hopefully, if we've done our jobs. Peeling paint, lifting shingles, cracked windows, doors to nowhere. Stucco that's peeling or cracking is problematic as well. This, in a way, I tell my lenders to think like it's a VA loan or an FHA loan.
FHA. So
because they'll call that stuff out.
Right. FHA always calls out peeling paint. Why?
Yeah.
Because the wood will deteriorate if it's not sealed.
Bingo.
So, and then if the exterior is in bad condition, I have seen where the siding was melted on one side.
Bingo. Yeah.
There was a bad hailstorm in Monticello one time. It looked like Lebanon.
Yeah.
So they
Shotguns.
said, sellers said, we'll give you credit. No.
Yeah, not going to work. Not going to work.
Not
So
gonna
just be aware that these things, I can bind the insurance policy on the property, but all the insurance companies are going to do an exterior after closing, after new business, and they'll say, we noticed this, this, and this.
Okay.
And they need to be addressed, or you'll get a notice of cancel.
Does that always happen?
The cancel doesn't always happen. Sometimes they'll say you have until next renewal, for example, to fix these cosmetic issues. But it's adjuster's discretion. It's underwriting discretion. So if they say this foundation crack or this sidewalk crack is significant enough where it's a huge liability exposure to us, they'll say fix it, or we're going to give you a 21-day cancel.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's very important. Electricity.
Big time.
Okay, so electric right now is a big deal because many houses are going all electric.
Yeah.
I have sold houses with knob and tube.
It's a bad word in my world.
Well, my seller argued, no, my brother's an electrician and knob and tube is better than the raw mix that we're actually using. And I'm like, really? So could you debate that?
Sure. Well, so here's the best part about our jobs. I don't have to debate him. I just have to tell him what the insurance companies say. And so he can plead his case and he can go to the lawyers and he can try to get the policies rewritten. But generally speaking, if you have functional, still attached knob and tube, you're going to get a decline. I have to check a box.
Would you explain to people what knob and tube is?
Well, I barely know. So it's
I do.
It's very well. You can tell me more about it. But
Okay,
it's one of the first methods of stringing electricity through a home.
Right.
And it's exposed wires. It's exposed.
Well, they're not really
electrical
exposed.
tubes.
They're covered with a cloth.
Well, right. And that's not flammable, right?
I know, that's a big protection.
Yeah.
And then they have these little spindles, white ceramic spindles that they run through so the wood doesn't attach to any wood. It's floating there because we don't want exposed wires next to wood at all.
Right. So there's this much space with cloth sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen that. And then, they have a button. You'll see if there is a button at the front door instead of a switch, that would indicate.
Yeah.
And it's extremely expensive to rewire a whole house.
$20,000, $30,000 sometimes, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, anywhere from, depending on who is doing it.
Yep.
And if you are upgrading your house, let's say you want to convert to induction cooking and a heat pump and all.
Yeah.
So getting rid of some of the gas appliances, you might want to consider either rewiring, which is expensive, or even a secondary panel.
Yep.
Which would be under $1,500.
Yep. So that's a great segue, because if you have partially connected knob and tube, or you have disconnected knob and tube that's not on your electrical grid, that's still like say in an attic or basement, that can be acceptable with some carriers as long as we have a breaker box and we have 100 amp service throughout the house or higher.
Okay.
So knob and tube and fuses are generally problematic, but if they're disconnected or they're not providing electricity to the home or the primary source, it can be acceptable. But as a general rule of thumb, I caution my realtors and my loan officers, knob and tube is bad. Very flammable and oftentimes ineligible.
And I still see some homes with fuses.
Yep. And yeah, exactly. I think it was 30s, 40s, 50s. Like they kind of phased out eventually, but you'll still see them here and there. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, dark basement with a flashlight, they sent me down there.
Precisely, right. Exactly.
That was safe.
Yeah. Totally.
Moving right along.
Yeah.
Sewer lines. Let's talk about sewer lines.
Yes. So in a wonderful turn of events in your industry, it's very common now to request sewer scopes.
Yep.
So this is often not an eligibility issue because it's hidden and it's underground. It's not often going to stop you from getting insurance. But what realtors and their clients need to know is that you can insure this buried line. And
that's really important.
And it's really important because, again, when we're talking about the average cost of these things, we're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 to repair the line from where it attaches underneath your home to the curb where it attaches to city sewer.
I will tell you that one year I negotiated 2 collapsed sewer lines. And at the time, it was $5,000 each. That was a few years ago.
Right.
Now it's 10 to 15 to those.
Yep.
I also had one that was collapsed in one part. It was like 80 some feet.
Yep.
And the widow said, I thought my husband replaced that.
Yeah.
And he replaced 30 feet of it,
Wow.
but not the other 50 feet.
Right.
So that is some negotiability. Why is that such an important part of insurance?
Great question. So generally speaking, your insurance policy insures your dwelling. It doesn't insure your land. So it doesn't insure your trees. It doesn't insure things in your land. So by default, your main sewer line is in your land underneath your home.
That's right.
So it's not insured by default.
Right.
So the reason I bring it up is because, again, like you said in the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. You have to ask your insurance agent, or your insurance agent has to suggest buried utility lines coverage.
So how would a homeowner know how old their sewer line is?
Really good question. So you could look up permits, right-of-way permits, sewage permits. You can ask the previous owners. Generally speaking, you're not going to know. I would assume, especially we're in St. Paul in a 120-year-old Victorian, that the line is about as old as when it got hooked up to the line. So I would assume.
And those were clay lines.
Clay, tile and clay, I think is how they set them up exactly. Yep. And so, facts to know, you often can't even insure the entire line. But what I tell my clients, for $50 a year, which is just pennies, you can get oftentimes $10,000 worth of coverage, which will cover your diagnostic and it'll cover a lot of your cost.
Okay.
So
That's
it's just
great.
it's one of those things where why wouldn't you buy it for the potential risk of collapse?
People don't know.
Yeah, exactly. People
really don't know.
Yeah.
And like in South Minneapolis, and all of our lines are old. I had a client one time, we had a buyer, and the buyer had a scope, and it showed the line. There was a crack, but it was clean. So my seller said, so what's the problem?
Yep.
And the buyer goes, we want new.
Ooh.
So we canceled.
Yeah, well, it's the cat and mouse of real estate. Correct.
Absolutely, all the time. So if it's cracked, if it's a clean crack, it's not a problem now, but it's something you want to watch.
Exactly. So from my standpoint as the agent, I keep touching my mic, sorry. I need to know, from an ethical standpoint, I need to know that it's a clean bill of health. Because if you tell me we did a scope, it's collapsed, I can in good faith add the coverage for you.
Okay.
If you have a scope and the scope looks clean, stop talking and just say, okay, great, let's add it. Because if you don't have a collapsed line yet, you can buy coverage for your line.
Okay.
But you need to do the right thing and put your insurance agent in a position where he can do the ethical thing as well. But know that it's covered for intrusion, it's covered for collapse, and it covers the excavation to get the line out of the ground to replace it.
Yep. Right, and they're using mostly PVC now to
and sometimes they can do they do a sleeve as well, where they have ways to mitigate your costs in a way. But again, it's one of those you don't know if you don't know, so it's important to ask about it.
Right, and the thing is, there are only a couple of companies that really do this.
Yep.
There aren't Don't call a plumber; they don't do it.
Yeah, they don't do it.
Okay, moving along.
Yeah.
Occupancy. Now, this is a big problem for landlords.
Big time.
When you have a lease and 2 people move in and 2 people are on the lease, and all of a sudden you have 7 people in the apartment, what happens?
Right. So top view for the insurance purposes, I need to know first and foremost whether or not it's owner occupied.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that, and lending changes this as well. We need to know whether you're living in the home or not. The basic concept is that an owner of a property will take better care of it than a tenant. True or untrue, that's how it's dictated. The liability exposure is different.
Tenants don't care.
They care less than the owners, you would think.
They do.
So a lot of times I have people who are very casual about, well, I may or may not rent it out. Well, if you tell me that you're living in it, and I write a single family owner occupied home, and a claim happens, and the claims adjuster goes and talks to a tenant, we have a problem because we've misrepresented the occupancy. And so I always say, best case scenario, they backdate, make you write a new policy and charge you extra premium. Worst case scenario, and the likely scenario, is that they say, this is a misrepresentation of the occupancy, therefore we cannot cover the claim, which is a huge, huge problem.
It is a huge problem. And it's a problem for landlords on wear and tear on the property as well. Or sometimes people will move in and they don't disclose they have 3 kids.
Yep, exactly.
And so the more people in a property, the harder it is work.
Exactly. And so from the insurance standpoint, we operate in number of families. So we care less about the number of people and more about how many separate units there are. So in the personal lines market, before you go to a commercial policy, you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 unit properties. We can do up to a 4-plex on the residential side.
That's right.
And so also the other subdivision we need to be aware of is long-term versus short-term leases. We live in an age of the gig economy and Airbnb.
Right.
Not all carriers will tolerate an Airbnb risk. So they'll say, what's the length of your term for your leases? 6 months or greater is often called a long-term lease. And anything under that is short-term. So you need to be aware, if you're going to own a duplex, live in half, Airbnb the other, you just have to let your agent know, so the agent is putting you in a policy that is aware of that and tolerates that.
I suppose the same would go, let's say someone had a second home and they would rent it out part-time or Airbnb.
Yep. So exactly. Same thing.
Okay.
If you are an owner occupier of the property, at least partial parts of the time, you can get away with the most. It's legit to sometimes rent it out. You just have to make sure that your policy tolerates that exposure.
All of that.
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Business assurance, vandalism, or if your home is vandalized. That's been ugly in Minneapolis for the past few years. So what advice do you have to people who have a business or live in an area that's been vandalized?
Yeah, so overall, as long as it kind of gets into the parts of the business insurance policy, which we won't spend too much time on, but what I find a lot of people and business owners doing is their vendors will require them to get a certificate of insurance. All that vendor is asking for is liability. So what I see some of the business owners do is they buy themselves a general liability policy with no property component. So
well, the cities too, depending on the business, require that you have insurance.
Exactly. So my first recommendation, make sure you have an actual business owner's policy, also known as a BOP, which has general liability and a property component, which generally covers vandalism for you. It also generally covers loss of use and income interruption. And it also oftentimes covers civil authority interruption, where if it's getting shut down for a riot or for police action or for something like that, it can also help restore lost income. Now this got really dicey and really court challenged through all of the riots during COVID in 2020. And these policies are being modified. Big dollars. Big dollars. So the best case is to ask an insurance agent that you trust for what you need to look for based on your location. You want to know about business glass, you want to know about what part you're responsible for if you're a commercial tenant, for example, versus owning a building. You're always going to want to know where the lines start and where they end. Some landlords, commercial landlords, cover your glass. Some of them don't. If you have a storefront, you're going to want to know that.
Oh, absolutely.
So a good insurance agent.
Because that's the first to go.
Exactly. But a good insurance agent is going to want to review your commercial lease for you. And if they don't, it's another red flag.
Yes. Okay. Now the juicy part. What will you absolutely not cover?
As far as business insurance goes?
No. Residential, anything. What are the big red flags?
The big no-nos. Well, existing damage is always going to be problematic. You had your story with your friend who had a fire and then wanted to try to buy.
I'll explain briefly.
Yeah.
Client's brother called up and he said, "I need insurance. Can you recommend?" And I went, "Okay. Why do you need insurance now?" "Well, because I just had a fire."
Right.
So you really need insurance before the fire.
Yep.
So the story was he bought a cheap house in North Minneapolis, lived in it for 5 years. He bought it for cash, never had insurance.
Yep.
Then he moved out of state and rented it. No idea he should have insurance with renters in there.
Yep.
So the renters turned the living room into a photo studio. One plug, a whole strip, blew out the whole north side of the house. The renters really didn't see that it was a big deal problem. They thought you could place a few windows in the wall.
Yeah.
But the city condemned it. It was boarded up, and he thought he could get insurance.
Not so much. Yeah, so existing damage is obviously a serious problem. If you have a burned out hulk of a home, you can't get insurance on it.
Right.
More nuanced ones now, honestly, 15 to 20 year roofs are, especially considering debt to income needs for lending, can be very problematic because not everyone can afford $4,000 a year for a 20-year roof, even though it's only a $220,000 home.
Right.
Big foundation issues and cracking in the sidewalk are going to be big liability hazards that get you declines. Missing windows, like I said.
Well, there's a big difference between missing windows and a foundation.
True, very true.
Foundations, sometimes they're repairable, sometimes not so much.
Another soft piece for our animal lovers. We do still live in an age of special breeds that are not acceptable. I can't list all 8 to 9 of them, but they're your Dobermans, they're your pit bulls, they're your even your mixes with those two dogs.
Right.
A lot of carriers will say, "Do you have any of these restricted breeds?"
Okay.
That will get you a decline.
What if a homeowner doesn't report it and they haven't?
Great question. I, as an insurance agent, have to click a box that says, do we have any restricted breeds on premises? If I don't know, I'll hit no.
Okay.
What I'm seeing more and more with technology is we're doing aerial. I say we, I'm not an insurance agent or insurance company employee. They're doing aerial and drive-by and overviews. And I've had letters get sent out as, hey, we drove by and we saw that you have a pit bull. Okay. And I send them a letter. And here's the absurd thing. They say, get rid of the dog or we're canceling your policy.
Oh, ow.
So obviously, animal lovers, they have to shop for new insurance.
Right.
And it's very problematic. It's very tricky. So
that is, okay. So fireplaces.
Fireplaces.
Okay. So we have a range of fireplaces.
We definitely do.
We have the original 1800s fireplaces with the old clay flue. We have upgraded 1950s ones, but they still have the flue and they're still wood.
Yep.
Then we have gas furnaces or gas fireplaces and electric fireplaces.
Yep. So, again, I always speak broadly like a politician. Generally speaking, if it's professionally installed and it's got the codes for distance and clearance and all that good stuff with all your spectrum of your fireplaces, they're acceptable.
Okay.
Where we start getting into issues are solid fuel. So we're burning wood, we're burning things. Right. Yep. So that's generally okay as long as it's an original fireplace and it's built into the wall, it has a chimney, it has proper venting, and it's been checked.
And it's lined.
And it's lined, right?
Right.
So what we run into sometimes is we see freestanding or things in the middle of the room, and you wouldn't believe what people do. I mean, I have people who have, if you do a beautiful tile build out with your correct clearances and you have your little tag from the fire marshal or whatever and it's approved, not a problem. Okay. As long as it's auxiliary. So that's another piece too. We can't have main heating sources as secondary heating. That's a box I have to check in every single application as well. Okay. Are there any secondary heating sources? Okay. Are they solid burning fuels? Are they professionally installed? So generally speaking, I always want to say use your head here, but we never know whose head we're using. So if you take an electric stove...
The worst mistakes I have ever made were using my own logic. Thinking other people would agree with me.
Correct. So freestanding stove on carpet, it's not going to work. Not going to work. No. And if you are putting it in real estate photos, it's probably not going to work because they're looking at the same information that we are. Okay. Know that professionally installed is very important and it has to be secondary. Can't be has to be auxiliary or secondary. It can't be primary.
Gas fireplaces.
Gas fireplaces are generally fine. As long they like I said, most of them are professionally installed, and sometimes they'll ask when's the last time it was inspected if it's particularly old. Okay. But again, proper venting, proper installation, all that stuff kind of comes down to did you do it the right way? Okay. If you did it the right way and we can show that you did it the right way with photos and inspections, generally not a problem.
You're not going to believe it.
I will probably believe it.
I had a client who installed their own fireplace.
Yep, there we go. There we are. That doesn't check any of the boxes that we just talked about.
Boxes checked.
Yep.
That was a hot mess.
Yep, exactly.
I asked him, please never do that again.
Correct.
Pools.
Pools and trampolines are a great one. So you wouldn't believe how many, I live in an HOA or a planned urban development in Lakeville. All the houses are this far apart.
That's right.
Everyone's yard is everyone's yard. Okay. So there's a trampoline in the middle. All 10 neighborhood kids play on the trampoline at all times. No fences anywhere. Oh. And so as the no fun spoiler insurance agent, I go, that house is uninsurable, that house is uninsurable. Generally speaking, you have to have a fence, a locking fence.
You have to have a fence around a pool.
Same thing with a pool.
Pool has to be
so they're attractive hazards for liability because people flock to them.
Oh, especially the pool, you don't want your neighbor's 4-year-old to waddle over to your yard.
Correct. So what a fence does is it gives you plausible deniability about trying to protect the hazard.
So the trampoline would have to belong to one house and be enclosed.
So yes, and some people have the netting on the trampoline. That's not the same thing as a fence. I've had this question before. You have to have your yard fenced if you want to have a trampoline. Otherwise, they're going to do the aerial photos after inspection. They're going to say no. They're either going to say show me pictures of the trampoline gone or build a fence. Okay. Or they're going to decline it.
How high does that fence have to be?
I am not a fence expert.
Okay.
I think it has to be high enough for a toddler not to jump over it.
Okay. Or even, small kid.
But I think if you talk to a fence company, they're going to say, here's industry standard for height, fence height. And then those experts will walk you through what kind of fences you need to get. But trampolines and pools are a liability issue. If, to answer your potential follow-up question, if you have a liability loss and your agent checked no pool, no trampoline, it's very likely going to be denied. And those aren't small liability claims.
During your session, I saw one that was leaking and it was close to the house.
Yep.
So that created an issue. Number two, the liners are hugely expensive. Even a small pool can be $20,000 to reline.
Yep. And that's not counting any of the landscaping, any of the hardscaping,
water,
any of that stuff. Yep.
The water, the pump, the maintenance of the pool, they are very difficult.
Exactly.
And lastly, security systems. What do you recommend?
So here's my take on security systems. I am so for them simply because it is my professional opinion after doing this for 11 years that one of the worst insurance claims you can go through from a client standpoint is a theft claim.
Okay.
Because you've just had your things stolen. It's very violating. It's very icky. And then you feel like you're the bad guy because you have to justify the experience to the claims adjuster.
Stolen car, for example.
Stolen car, stolen jewelry, a house broken into. You're like at your worst where you feel you've been violated your privacy.
Vulnerable.
And the insurance agent goes, well, what happened? Where was it? Did you leave the keys in it? As an insurance agent, I had my car stolen last fall out of my garage in Lakeville.
I'm on Nextdoor.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day you hear it.
Every day.
Every day.
Broken into either the car, the house, or somebody was doing something. You know.
So my final word of caution, or just my FYI with security systems. It's very common for security systems companies to sell their systems and talk about an insurance discount. It's 100% baloney, total baloney.
Oh.
You don't get a discount. You get like a 1% discount, and it might be even less than that. You might literally get $4 or $5 off of your $2,500 a year insurance policy. The reason for that is when you're looking at the data, 1.8 to 1% of claims in insurance are theft claims. 40% are wind and hail, 20% are fire and lightning, 25% are water. So when you're looking at what costs the insurance companies money and how they reward discounts, they're going to reward discounts for the things that they pay the most for.
Okay, so where you live makes a difference, Joe.
The zip code, we can get into how rates are set, but zip codes are a big part of it. If you drive in Minneapolis downtown versus driving in a farm in Farmington, you're going to have a lot different loss ratios for comp, collision, and liability.
Yes.
Just facts, just data.
Right.
Yeah.
So the level of crime in the neighborhood could affect.
It can, unfortunately, it can affect. And again, not to stand in a soapbox, that's one of the unfortunate things about how rates are set is because math doesn't account for socioeconomic realities. And so what happens is that the people who can least afford expensive insurance,
they get stuck with high.
Have an expensive insurance.
Right. And they live in older homes.
Bingo.
Yep. There we go.
Exactly.
Dash, thank you so much for having us in. I so much appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. And if you click below, we will have Dash's red flag guide to let you know and his information where to be in touch with him if you have questions or if you hate your insurance agency, you've got a new one.
You can potentially have a new one.
So thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned. There'll be more.
Thanks all.